Welcome to the Village podcast. I am your host, Nicole Trunfio. My why has always been to empower women and amplify the voices of mothers. We created the Village to share stories and ideas to embody the innate wisdom of a village, but on a modern day platform. I hope this podcast inspires, educates, and informs you and brings you the joy, love, and light you deserve. Welcome to the Village. So today we're sitting with Allyson Felix, who is the most decorated track and field Olympic athlete of all time. She has moved mountains for women in sports. She really changed the game when she was renegotiating her contract with Nike and then went on to write an op-ed for the New York Times. She left her partner, her sponsor Nike, and went on to start her own footwear company made for women by women called Saysh. Allyson, I'm so excited to talk to you today. I feel so honored to be sitting next to you.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm really excited to get into all those topics.
Yeah. One question I love to start with is what lit the fire inside of you? How did this all begin?
I think it's interesting. Like, I've always just been a more reserved person. And I think I've really stayed inside of my box of just like my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And so as an athlete, I've always just focused on what I was supposed to be doing, running fast, trying to win medals, trying to break records. And that was what I did.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really until I started going through these real life situations where, the whole Nike ordeal and having my daughter and the complications there, it was those things that really shifted for me and like gave me the courage to be able to speak out. And I really think becoming a mother changed everything because it was no longer just about me, using my voice for me. It was like, it's about my daughter and the generation that she's going to grow up in and all of those things. So I would say just going through real life stuff like pushed me to have to do things.
There's like this certain grace about you and like really grounded, stable energy, and I'm like wondering where that comes from. Like, what was your childhood like?
Yeah.
What were your parents like? What was your household like?
Yeah, I definitely think it comes from my childhood. My parents are extremely hardworking people. My dad, a minister, my mom, a teacher. And so they had professions where they're in service to other people. And I guess I really just saw them care about people. And, they're always like held character and integrity to such a high point that for me, that's what they taught me that you have character and integrity in every single thing you do. And so I think that, I had that foundation and I then brought it to, my own profession and different things that I was going through in my own life.
So how did they teach you? Because you seem like you've always had like a really good head on your shoulders and it's never gotten to your head and you're just very focused. So where does that come from?
My dad being a pastor, we're a family that was centered on faith. And so I think it was always like very clear that like, my gift of running was a blessing and like using it in that way. And then also just like having a humility with everything that you do. And that's something that I really just like took a hold of because I think you never accomplish anything alone. And I think that keeps you from getting like a big head because it's like, no, like, first of all, this is a gift that I have. And then also there's all these other people who pour into me to get me to these different places. And so like, I would be nowhere without like the team of people that, have worked with and on the track, the team of people that get me to that place. And I think I've just always been able to recognize that and be really grateful for it as well.
Yeah, it's really beautiful to kind of see that you're now working with your brother as well. I don't know. My dad always said to me, if you can count your friends on one hand, you're a really lucky person. Like your true friends, like having that tight community, even as you scale to these heights is like so valuable if you keep the same people with you.
What you said really resonates with me. It's like, who matters in your life? Who are the people who care about you with the success or without it? Those are your people. But I think like early on, success was very clear cut for me, and in track and field, it was very easy to, determine if I was successful or not. It would be a gold medal. And if it wasn't a gold medal, it was like an absolute failure and it would like crush me. And then I think I just started to grow and evolve and towards the end of my career, I just completely redefined what success was for me. And it changed to be impact. You know, like how I think I thought for a long time, my purpose was like, okay, it's running fast. Like that's what it's all about. And then after going through these things, I was like, no, I actually think my purpose is to have an impact, like to move the needle, to create change, to do something, use my platform for something.
Yeah.
And that's now how I measure success.
When you say that gold medal, what did that gold medal mean to you?
I think it was just a sense of accomplishment, like setting a goal, having a process to get there and kind of ticking it off and then saying like, okay, where do I go from here? It's the next thing. So I think it was so much about accomplishing, you know, whatever I set out before me in this very like methodical way.
So if you didn't get a gold medal, would you judge yourself or was it just
Absolutely.
like, you would? Okay.
I think early on in my career, I would like spiral into a deep, dark place of like embarrassment of, just having a difficult time moving forward from that. And so it was really challenging, you know, dealing with like a defeat. And I think it's also like a defeat in a very public space where there are expectations that people have of you. And if you don't reach those, you know, what does that mean? And I think also my identity like has been tied into being a runner for such a long time. Yeah. And I think I struggled with it early on because I think you feel like in the failure that's also who you are and that's my worth. And so not, you know, obtaining that thing also is like, okay, I'm not good enough. And so it took lots of years in therapy to break all of that down.
It breaks my heart to hear that because you were probably, how old were you when you were going through this?
Yeah, like early teen, like not early teenage, but 17, 18,
which
you know?
is such an important, like pivotal moment for women. Like you're coming into your womanhood, right?
Yeah.
So without all of that, without being on TV at the Olympic Games or the World Championships, it's hard enough. So listening to you say that, it really like deeply resonates and breaks my heart. But at what point after all of these successes, when you really started to like get to the height of your career, did you sign with Nike?
Yeah, so I signed with Nike. It was about 2009. And so I was just, still on the very like upswing of my career. Yeah. And was really excited about it, you know, really loving the potential of it. And for the most part, it was a great partnership. You know, I performed really well. We got to do some really neat things that I'm proud of together. And I didn't have any issues until really it was towards the end of my contract.
At the end of your contract, what happened? Yeah,
so I got to this place in my career where I paused for a second. I was like, okay, I have like all the medals, I have the things, but I really don't have what mattered most to me. And I had always wanted to be a mother. And I had put it off for a really long time. And not because someone told me like, oh, you have to wait, but it's really what I saw in my sport. And so in my sport of track and field, there was like this culture of silence around pregnancy and starting a family. And that was because the way our contracts are structured. And so a track and field contract is structured based on performance. And so you go to the Olympics or World Championships, you get a bonus, but you don't medal, you get a reduction. Now, if you have a baby during that time, there's nothing in place to keep you from having a reduction of salary. And so what was happening in my sport is that women would have babies and they would be reduced and pushed out of the sport. And so I think it just created a lot of fear in me to start a family because it's like, okay, if I still want to compete, then what am I going to do? And I'd seen like my friends and my teammates go through this and I saw them just struggle. I never saw someone who was celebrated and, you know, able to do both and supported in the way that they should. And so I put it off for a long time. And then I got to that place in my career where I was like, okay, I've done the things, like it should be safe now. The negotiations started off awful. They started off at that 70% less place. And that was before I even told them I was pregnant. I think that amplified the fear because it's it's already in this bad place, but I still went forward and I became pregnant. And then because I had all that fear, I started to hide my pregnancy.
I heard that you, would run at night. So people couldn't tell that you were pregnant.
I would run when it was dark or the early hours of the morning when no one was outside. And
That's wild.
Yeah, this time that I had always wanted. Like I rarely left, like if I wasn't training, early, I wouldn't leave the house. I would wear baggy clothes. Like I was doing all this stuff because I didn't have an offer on paper. And I just felt like if they find out, like it's just all going to disappear. But I got to a place where I turned my attention away from the salary piece of it. And I just asked for maternal protection. So basically, I would just ask for time to be able to recover from pregnancy.
Yeah.
Where I wouldn't be reduced and where other women wouldn't be reduced.
Fair. That's fair.
I thought so.
Yeah.
But when my contract came back, it didn't have any mention of like pregnancy, maternity, like nothing to tie that time to having a baby. And so what I realized was they weren't ready to like set that precedent for all female athletes, to put that contractually in there.
Yeah.
And for me, that was just what was unacceptable. It was like, there's no way in this day and age that we can have that happen, And so I decided to write the New York Times op-ed. I decided to part ways and try to, at the time, I don't think I thought anything would really happen, but try to create change.
So what were they giving you in the contract? They were giving you time off?
Yeah. So they were
how
willing,
much time was it?
I don't even know exactly. I think I asked for 12 months. And I think it probably was the 12 months that I asked for.
Yeah. But they weren't saying.
They weren't. So I think the actual wording that they communicated to us was they wanted to take it on a case by case basis, like person by person.
Yeah. Got you.
And to me, that's just like, they're like, I felt like, well, they're probably, if you're successful, then okay, you have the time.
Yeah.
But what about like all the other women who, and also just the culture, like you're telling women that they have to choose between motherhood and a profession that they love. And I just think that that's not okay.
For sure. And after you had your baby, you still came back and kept competing.
Yeah.
So after you wrote the op-ed, you departed from Nike.
I did. I left Nike and I partnered with Athleta. They're owned by Gap Inc. And it was just this really beautiful partnership. I feel like I really became empowered, and I'm still sponsored by them today. And they have a business that's 97% female. It's female led. And I felt like I was given a seat at the table. And because of that, I think I started to like feel like a sense of confidence in what I could do and that I didn't have to do things the traditional way.
And out of that partnership, you decided to take matters into your own hands, which I'm like such an advocate for. There's so many brands out there that are kind of legacy brands and they've been around for a long time. And to see these new brands popping up with a fresh perspective and such a unique kind of aesthetic.
Yeah.
So tell us about Saysh.
Yeah. So when I was going through this whole ordeal and I was looking for a footwear sponsor because I was still training for the Olympics, and I was actually having a conversation with my brother and I was venting to him. I was just like, I am so tired and really just exhausted of begging companies to see my worth. Like, I think it's crazy that I've 6-time Olympic champion and I cannot find a sponsor. And so he was just like, I think we should do this ourselves.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm not so sure about that. But the longer that like I sat with his words and really understood what he was saying, I was like, no, you're right. Like, this is our opportunity to be a change maker, to be like a disruptor and say like, take matters into our own hands. And so we created Saysh, and we're a lifestyle brand for women. And I think what we thought we were doing was creating shoes that I could wear in the Olympics. Like, okay, and maybe other women would want to wear them too. Yeah. But as we went down that path, we learned that shoes have not been made for women. And what that means is just a shoe is made off of a last, which is a mold of a foot.
Yeah. And let's dig into this. So she just said shoes have not been made for women. Yeah. Right? And for those of you that don't know what a last is, it's kind of this wooden or metal or they make them out of plastic, right?
It's just like a mold of a foot. It's like
mold
your
of
foot.
A foot.
It's a foot.
That's used to mold any kind of shoe around. And
it's always a man's foot used to make shoes that are called women's shoes.
What?
Yeah. And that was and it took me a second to like grasp that, because I'm like, no, I've bought women's sneakers before. Like, you go into the store and there's like the women's section.
Yeah.
And then someone broke it down to me that like, that's just marketing. Like they're just changing the colors, like they're just telling you that this is for you when it's really not. And when we learned that, we were like, oh, we're absolutely where we're supposed to be. And so that's what our company does. We make shoes to fit the form of the female foot. And there are differences between men's and women's feet.
Yeah.
And more than that, we feel like, yes, we make shoes, but really we're about community and like bringing people together and just saying that women deserve better in every single capacity.
Also, another defining factor, which is so unique, I think, and really outside of the box, is the fact that another great thing about your footwear is that when women are pregnant, what do you guys do?
Yeah. So we have this maternity returns policy that basically, not everyone knows this, but like a woman's shoe size can change when she's pregnant. And oftentimes that change in size doesn't go back.
Yeah.
And so if you have a pair of our shoes, we'll just give you your new size and that's it. And so we feel like that's what women deserve. And we really want to push the industry in that way.
So you are pregnant now. And how is that for you? How's pregnancy?
I had actually a really uneventful pregnancy for the most part. And I still want to compete. So I was still training and I was running and in the pool and lifting weights. And I felt really strong and great. And everything was all good until I went to the doctor at 32 weeks for just a routine appointment. And then that's when I learned that I had all these complications. And so I was taken to the hospital. And I was told I was going to be monitored. And so I was hooked up to everything and got monitored. And then I was admitted. And then they told me I had a severe case of pre-eclampsia.
So you were just going for a routine checkup. How did you know from that point?
So when I went in for my checkup, they told me that I was spilling protein.
So you do a urine test when you go in. So did they see it there?
They did. Immediately they saw that I was spilling protein. And then they hooked me up and monitor like my heart rate, baby's heart rate and all of that. And then my doctor was still concerned. And then they sent me over to like triage and for further monitoring. And it wasn't like a lot of communication happening at that point. I wasn't really sure all that was going on.
Yeah.
And then when I was admitted, they gave me that diagnosis.
So you're just going for a routine checkup. You do all the things, the blood pressure, the weight, all that stuff. And they're like, we see something unusual.
Yeah.
Are you freaking out at this point?
Not as much because it wasn't really communicated at that point.
Got you.
It was just like in the back and I was in there for a long time and I was concerned about that. And then my doctor comes in and she explains that I need like further testing. And me being the person who's always trying to do a million things, I actually had a photo shoot that day. So I was like, okay. She told me she wanted me to go to the hospital. I was like, okay, cool. I'll go do the shoot and then I'll go to the hospital.
Yeah.
And then she's like, no. And I think that's when I was like, something is wrong.
Did you know what pre-eclampsia was?
No. And at that point, the word pre-eclampsia hadn't even come out. So I don't even know. I know nothing. I'm just like, something is wrong.
Like most of us, right?
Yeah.
Like I didn't know what it was when I had. Now I do because I'm in the maternity space, but it's like before that, which is why we're doing this podcast to inform people. Second question, fun one. What was the shoot for?
Oh, the shoot was actually an ESPN shoot. And I was kind of just really talking about my pregnancy because of all the whole ordeal, no one knew I was pregnant. So we were going to do a story just like really sharing that news and that whole journey. And so, it was like all in the works.
So it was a big day.
Yeah. It was going to be really special, but none of it ever happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you go to the hospital and then what happens from there?
Yeah. So I go to the hospital and I'm admitted. And at that point, it's just really difficult from there on out. They're monitoring me and they explain that I have these characteristics that are severe of preeclampsia. And so they're constantly checking me for my vision, if I'm having headaches, because what happens in preeclampsia is you have an elevated blood pressure. And the next thing is you have like organ failures. And so you're at risk of having seizures and a stroke and all of these different things. And so they're trying to make sure that that doesn't occur.
How are you feeling physically at this point?
I still felt okay. And I think that's a scary part of preeclampsia is that for many women, you don't have symptoms, you feel fine, and until it's too late, you know, that's when everything. So I was still feeling all right, but I was, you know, presenting all of these like very scary characteristics.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so at this point, are they educating you more?
No, at this point, it's too late. Like everything's happening very quickly. And so I just feel like there was no point where they had the time to kind of like educate me about what was happening. I remember we got to one place and it seemed like things were just spiraling. You know, I'm on oxygen and I'm being moved in all these different directions. And they told me to take off all my jewelry. And I was just like, I feel like something's happening here. Like I remember asking because my family was across the country, and I was like, "Do I need to call my family?" Like, and the doctor said yes. And yeah, and so later, the next day, I was rushed in for an emergency C-section, and my daughter was born 2 months early, and it was really scary and just really unexpected. I think being an athlete and being someone who's like, I've always taken care of my body. Like I just never imagined to be in this situation.
And so I heard, you know, you talk about your brother calling you as well at this point.
Yeah. I think actually like, I didn't know this conversation happened, but I think he talked to my husband and, when they told him like he needed to come, I think he expressed that like, or afterwards, he said like he didn't know what he was coming to, like if he was coming to see his niece be born or if he was coming and I wasn't going to make it. And I don't think I was so concerned just about my daughter. Yeah. I didn't know the severity that things were when it was all going on. Yeah. And so, my mind just wasn't even at that place.
Wow. Yeah. And so at what point did you kind of really understand what was happening?
I don't think I really understood the depths of it until after my daughter was born.
Like way later.
Yeah, until way after the fact. I mean,
did you ever think that things were going to not pan out at any point?
I didn't even like care what happened to me. It was just like my daughter. I remember asking the doctor at one point, like, well, you know, what happens to a baby that's born this early? You know, like what are the concerns? Like, because that's something that I just never even thought of, you know? And it was so unexpected. Like in my mind, I thought I was going to have this beautiful, like birth center birth. And, you know, that was like my ideal situation. So to be in this scenario was like so far from what I expected. Yeah. That I couldn't, it was hard for me, I think, to just wrap my mind around like what was even happening.
Yeah. So you originally dreamed about having birth in a birthing center.
Yeah. So at the hospital I was going to birth at, the hospital I did end up birthing at, there was this beautiful birthing center like inside of it. Yeah. And so I was like, did that, like hypnobirthing. Like I was like, this is going to be great. And it was just like thing after thing. And I remember being in the bed at one point and asking like, okay, like I'm going to be transferred to the birth center, right? And they're like, what are you talking about? Like you cannot even get up from the bed. Like, so it just wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it's so common, right? Yeah. It's like we all get told to make these beautiful birth plans. Yeah. And then a lot of us are just like, that's not what I had planned. Yeah. And it's just not up to us, really. It's wild. Yeah. And it's wild how we don't really have this education of such common things that happen.
Yeah, to be open and to know if something goes wrong, like, these are the things. Like my husband had to make a lot of decisions and we had to decide like, is he going to stay with me or our baby? Like all these things that you would never think of, you know, but I think it's good to be prepared, you know, in a worst case scenario to be able to say like, okay, this is what we're going to do in that situation.
Yeah. And really informed. Yeah. So how was that for you? So you went into an emergency C-section. Yeah. And then how was the time following that?
It was really challenging. My health still wasn't the best. And so I was still in the hospital and my daughter was in the NICU. And so it was really challenging, just even the logistics of it. Like I was on one floor and she was on another floor. I wasn't able to see her right away. Like I saw her after the C-section and then she was like whisked away. And they took me to a separate room. And, so it was just so far from like what you hope.
For sure.
Yeah. And then just the challenge and the heaviness of being in the NICU.
Yeah. And so what was happening with your body during this time?
I still was suffering from the pre-eclampsia. I still had elevated blood pressure that they were having a difficult time regulating.
Yeah.
And so still at risk of seizure and stroke and all of those things.
Wow.
And so I was, dealing with that while she was, a preemie and dealing with all of the preemie things.
Yeah. And how long did that take for you to?
Yeah, I was in the hospital for about a week.
Yeah.
And then she was in the hospital for a month.
A month.
Yeah.
And so after a week, were you able to kind of see her in the hospital?
Yeah. So I was able to see her even when I was still in there, but it was just a whole process to get down there. You have to call somebody and they'd have to come and bring a wheelchair and try to help me down. And then after that, once I was released, then I was able to just be in her room around the clock. But during that other time, it was so challenging because my husband was going between floors and trying to figure it all out. And it was tough.
I don't know how it was even possible, but I heard that you were breastfeeding during this time, or is that?
Yeah, somewhat. So when you have like a premature baby, you start pumping right away, like immediately.
Yeah, in the hospital.
Every 3 hours around the clock. And so I was doing that. And so then once I was able to come down to her, then we could start breastfeeding. And so it was exhausting, just like pumping that much and and then just like moving back and forth between the two floors and all of that. But I felt really grateful because for a lot of preemies, that doesn't happen.
Your story gives me goosebumps. I'm just like blown away by everything that you guys went through.
Yeah.
And like being in the NICU, I'm sure that had its own whole world happening. Like that's not a fun place to be.
It's not. It's a very heavy place. Emotions are high for everyone who's there. And some days we'd have really good days. And when the doctors did their rounds, like it was really positive. And then there was other days where it was just a struggle and everything, your baby is hooked up to a million things and, it's difficult to touch them. And there's all these monitors and the beeping and all the different beeps mean different things and nurses rushing in. And then there's other families in the NICU and, you befriend them and sometimes they're having great days and some days like you don't know if their child's going to make it. And so I think it's just such a challenging spot to be in when all you want to do is like go home with your baby. Like you never imagine leaving the hospital without your child.
Which also brings me to, the maternal health crisis. And the Black maternal health crisis.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about that today and what's your kind of observation? Have we made any movement forward here?
I think we're still in such a difficult place. I think the statistics have told us that this is a growing problem. It's crazy to think that for me to give birth today is more dangerous than it was for my mother to give birth. Like, why is it progressing in a downward, trend? And I think then there's just all of these women who are having these complications, who are dying. And to me, it just infuriates me because so many of these complications and deaths are preventable. I think the number is something like 60% of them.
Yeah.
And it's just, we have to do more. Like we have to raise awareness like you're doing, like the education piece so that women know that they're at risk or what they should look for. There's policy change. There's all these things that I feel like we can be doing because we have to reverse this problem. Like there's no way we can go at this pace. When I think about, having another child, that's something that scares me. Like, will I be here to raise that child? And I think a lot of women have that fear with where maternal health is right now in America.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I felt the same way. I mean, when I gave birth to my first, I had a lot of complications. I had to have surgeries after. It was very different than your story. I mean, a lot of stories are so different, but I was petrified to give birth to my second and didn't plan it. And when I fell pregnant, I was petrified.
Yeah.
And
there's all that trauma.
Oh my gosh, the trauma.
Yeah.
And then, so in retrospect, going through everything that you went through, what did you wish you would have known
I wish that I would have been more educated. Like, I wish I would have known what preeclampsia was. I wish I would have known that I was at risk, a greater risk for it. I wish I would have known the signs that I could have looked for. And I think I would have hoped that I would have had a plan, like worst case scenario. What's going to make me feel the most comfortable and prepared in a situation that things don't go well? And yeah, I think those are things that I could have been prepared for.
Like, you seem like such a glass half full type of person. You're so optimistic. Is that something that you get from your parents and their parenting style?
I think my mom, she's a very positive person. And I think she like really tries to turn any situation into seeing the best light of it. And I think I do struggle with it sometimes. And I often call her like when I'm in whatever situation it is, and she's like flips it around and stuff. But
Awesome.
I try, like she's goals for me.
Yeah. Wow.
I do think that she had a balance. You know, she definitely disciplined.
Yeah.
She was a full-time working mother. She still managed to find time to like cook and like clean. And I'm just like, how, Mom? Like, there's no way that I'm trying to do these things and it's such a struggle. But I think that she really valued our relationship. Like, she always wanted us to have a good relationship, and she made that a priority. She set aside time to pour into my life and to take me on different trips where it could just be me and her. And so I think I always saw just like how important that was to her. Yeah. And felt that.
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Parents are under so much pressure, and becoming parents, you realize like how much.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And I think we all have a newfound respect for our parents. But were you ever tough on your mom before you knew what it was like to be a parent?
Yeah, I was a typical child growing up. And then afterwards, I didn't understand like how strong she was and how incredible, like, because I think it's just, there's a lot of things you don't know until you're in that position, until you become a mother yourself, or you realize how hard it is to balance things. And it was just like such an eye-opening experience of like, wow, you really did an incredible job. And I hope to like just be a piece of like what you were.
Oh, that's amazing. I hope she hears this.
Yeah.
We might need to have her come on as a guest.
I know she knows.
That's awesome. And then what about your dad?
Yeah. My mom and my dad, I think they're a really great balance of each other. You know, he was definitely the more serious disciplinarian, but also like showed that love as well. Yeah. And so I think they complemented each other really well, and just like how they chose to parent and how they showed up for us. Like, he also was that constant support. And I knew that whatever I was going to have, like a track meet or, you know, a speech contest at school, like he was going to be there. And so I think that gave me a really solid foundation.
That's interesting that you say that, because that really means a lot to kids, I think, is when parents are there. Yeah. They show up physically. It like means it's monumental.
Yeah, you need them to be present for sure.
And so how has that kind of affected your parenting style?
Yeah. I think it's really influenced it. You know, like I same as you, like I want to have an amazing relationship with my daughter. I want her to know that she can always come to me and that we can talk. And she's 4 right now, but I still like, I'm just trying to like build confidence in her. And the world is hard and it's so challenging. And like making sure she has the tools to be able to navigate, like she's going to have to fight her own battles. And so just trying to build her up to be able to do that.
So how are you navigating making sure your child has the right amount of confidence, the right amount of self-love, and the tools to handle, like the grit to handle the hardships?
Yeah, I think I'm still figuring it out as well. Like, I don't think anybody has all the answers. And like, kids are so different, you know, they all need something different. And so where my daughter is right now, you know, I'm trying to balance it. You know, we do our affirmations like on the way to school, and you know, we love that. But also like not sugarcoating everything and understanding like discipline is a part of things. And I too like to like talk through things. Like, you know, if there's going to be some type of discipline, like there's also a conversation, and trying to like really say that like it's okay to feel things and your emotions are valid, and like understanding that. So I think it's, you know, I think I'm parenting like in a very evolved way. I hope so. But at the same time, like still giving that really solid foundation.
Yeah, affirmations are really powerful, I think, for kids. So what are some of the ones that you and your daughter say?
Yeah, it was funny. We were doing ours today and she wanted to do some of her own and she came up with some really good ones. But like I just, whether it's about like being kind or being, something about like challenges helping you grow, whatever it is, try to kind of tailor it to maybe something she's going through or, where she's at. And I think they're just so powerful, even for me. Gosh. Like sometimes, I'm like, oh, this is like, I need to do these too.
I think we all need to do it. It's like, I remember talking to a friend and being like, what is the voice in your head saying? Mm-hmm. And she was like, I'm not good enough. She was in a really like hard place. And I was like, then you flip it. It's like the thing that keeps on your mind. It's like, okay, say, and I am good enough. And it's like you flip it in a positive and just saying that and putting those words out there. And teaching kids, I mean, I wasn't taught about affirmations.
Yeah, no.
So can you imagine the impact that if all of us can really start putting that positive energy into the world and into our children is really, really powerful.
Agree. I think it's so important.
So what were things that you remember your parents saying to you? Like standout things that just like you always hear?
My mom would always say, like once I started running and stuff and I was traveling a bit, she would just always say, remember who you are. And it was always like, this grounding of like, okay, remember your values,
gives me goosebumps.
Remember. I think she's kind of stopped, but like well into adulthood, she was still telling me, remember who I am. And I don't know, it's just brought me back to like purpose and just like, okay, don't get caught up with like all the stuff. It's a busy world out there. Like just remember your core.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
And then what about your dad?
He always, I think his was really faith-based, like remembering your upbringing, remembering, the blessings and all of those spiritual things.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was a really, really great combination.
Yep. So we love to give our community words of wisdom.
Okay.
So there are all of these parenting hacks out there, which could be really helpful for the parents in our community. Do you have any?
Redirecting. I think that's like one that I fall on a lot. Like, there's always like a chaotic situation going on or somebody wants something that they can't have and just like trying to redirect the attention somewhere else or reframe something. So I don't know. That's a go-to one.
That's a really good one though. Thinking about being a woman in this day and age and feeling like, I feel like we're quite isolated. Mm. What is something that you wished that was a shared wisdom that you wish was passed down, that we all knew?
I think just the really raw reality of how hard parenting is, specifically mothering. I think like just the ins and outs. Like I wish we just had more honest, and that's why I love what you're doing and what you're creating, because we need those honest conversations of that you're not alone, that this is hard. And that it's hard for everyone. I think we see like these beautiful images of like people being a mother and like it's all like happy and good. And it's like, it is not always like that. And that's okay. Like that's absolutely all right.
It's normal.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
it's actually not normal if it's not challenging because how are you meant to grow and learn? That's exactly what it is. It's like we're normalizing all of the things.
All the struggles.
Exactly. Because they're a part of that journey.
Yeah.
What wisdom would you like to pass down to our village? Something that's valuable and something that you feel will better inform them based on your experiences in life. It could be anything.
I think I would say that there are different seasons of life. And that I think when I'm going through a really challenging time parenting, I think like whether it was like, when I wasn't sleeping a lot and it was just like, this is just a season. Like it all goes so fast and there's going to be a time that I wish that I had a little baby, And so just saying that it's a season and I can appreciate that this is really hard, but I'm going to get through it. And then there's going to be a different season. And so just knowing that whatever the hardship is, it's not going to last forever. Yeah. And you can get through whatever that, and often doesn't feel like it when you're in it. But I think does something for you when like it's not always going to be like this.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful thing.
It's a really beautiful tool to have in our community's belt. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for your time today. I feel like there's so much light and love that's spread here. And I think a lot of people have already benefited from your work and are going to continue to through your words.
Thank you for having me.
So thank you for being here.
Thank you for what you're building. I think it's going to have a lot of impact.
Thank you for listening to the Village podcast, where we share unique stories, normalizing conversations and experiences in pregnancy, childbirth, postpartum, and motherhood. We are here to serve, and we really want to hear from you. So feel free to share, comment, like, and subscribe to keep this village growing. We are eternally grateful for you being with us and sharing space today. Until next time.